So first of all, I think it's kind of a contradiction if we say that the free internet depends on the monetization or on the advertising industry, right? Because if it's free in a liberal sense, then it should not depend on anything. And we know a lot of web pages and apps that only try to increase traffic and not really deliver valuable content anymore, and that's a problem. But I believe, or what I hope is that the latest trends in cryptography or other engineering innovations that help us, that give us data privacy, but still let those app publishers monetize on the awareness of the user, on advertising if they want, so that we don't have to decide either free internet or data privacy, but bring those two worlds together.
Hi and welcome to another episode of Information and Value. Every week I'm trying to get most exciting people here to talk about the evolution of the internet, some wrong turns we took, and solutions for it, like a potential Web 3.0. I am very excited to talk to Aurel Stenzel today. Aurel has been COO of Adjust, a company that is a little known, but that is actually on 90% of the mobile phones. So Aurel has a unique insight into the data, into the traffic of what became the Web 2.0 and mobile data. And we're going to talk about data privacy, data common, and how we can actually connect these two. What's also interesting is to talk to him about potential regulation and how he sees the oligarchy that currently owns the data and the online marketing. Aurel, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with a couple of shallow questions. What's an app that you have on your phone that you like and you use all the time?
Oh, that's a pretty easy one. It's just the Zeit newspaper app.
Okay. So you read a lot on your phone?
Yes, I do.
Not the all print version?
No, I only have the online subscription actually. Yeah.
All right. Different question. What's the technology, not like the big ones that we all read and hear about, that you are very excited about? Some gadget or tool that you bought or discovered?
Due to Corona, I just bought one of those Wahoo home trains where I can put my road bike in. I'm not sure if that's a piece of technology you were looking for.
Well, it kind of is, isn't it? I'm quite excited because you really, with Adjust, you really saw the traffic of what's happening basically with Web 2.0.
Sure.
What changed from when you started to now? What was the development that you could observe?
First of all, the numbers grew significantly, right?
Yeah.
I think I just saw that in 2020, more than $400 billion are spent on digital advertising, and that's multiple times more than it was 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And there was this one slide, which probably every ad tech or mobile ad tech company had in their presentations for investors, showing how much time people spend on their devices and how much advertising is being spent on. Right, and you had TV, you had newspapers, and you had mobile phones, and there you had that people spend a lot of time on their mobile phones, but money is not being spent there. They still spend all the money on the traditional advertising like TVs and newspapers, and this has shifted obviously as well, right? So I think in 2018, digital ad spend surpassed the traditional ad spend, and now mobile is more than half of the overall ad spend in total. And by larger numbers, what we also always have is ad fraud, right? So fraudulent people, a player came into the game and tried to steal a piece of this huge cake. So also at Adjust, we saw a significant increase in ad fraud, people trying with bots or fraudulent traffic to steal money from this ad traffic. And just to also name a number here, I think in last year we saw more than $160 million in ad fraud that has been prevented by Adjust for their clients. So that's also quite a significant number, I believe. Besides of the money that came into the business, obviously then also the whole industry became more mature, right? So 10 years ago it was very fragmented, no standardized, nothing. Mm. And this has also changed significantly over the last 10 years. It's still very fragmented, especially in the mobile space, but it became much better. And now you have those handful of dominant players, like, I mean, we know them, right? Facebook, Google, and so on, that have the majority of the overall market. And
I mean, depending on the market, we're talking about 60 to 70%. This is huge for just not even a handful of players to dominate. Why? How come that it became like that, and what's the reason for it?
Sure, maybe first the problem is even getting worse. So if you look into incremental growth of digital ad spend, Facebook and Google are taking 80-90% of that, right? So the problem that we're just describing is getting worse and worse every day. And why is that? So to start with, Facebook and Google was so successful because they just made it very simple, right? I mean, I had a side business back in the days, and even myself, without any marketing experience, I could set up a very targeted campaign within 20 minutes, right? So they made it very simple for non-marketers to set up very specific and targeted campaigns. Obviously, the reach was massive. Facebook, with their more than 1 billion users, had a huge audience. And then last but not least, it's also very safe, right? So we just talked about ad fraud. You didn't have much of fraud in Facebook, so it was also very secure.
Why is that different? I mean, how come that Facebook could control it so tightly when there is a rampant bot network that you guys obviously help to prevent in some form?
I mean, you usually don't have a bot network, right? You have, I mean, we all know them. You have the Flashlight app or the Bible app, or like all those apps that have like a very specific niche, very simple, and you're surprised how many people still use that, right? And those are publishers that are then summarized in one network. And the networks themselves, they have a hard time to control those individual app publishers and to see if they have ad fraud or not. So you never have a bot network, you always have bot apps, more or less, that kind of contribute to these publishers. And Facebook obviously had much easier challenge to solve by solving their fraud problem compared to another ad network that had like, I don't know, thousands of app publishers integrated, most of them not being in Europe, so very hard to track them down, what traffic they bring.
Okay. What do you think is the biggest challenge if you're looking at the way that the web is run nowadays, and what do you think could be developments that we still will see in the future?
Sure. So I think one very important development that you can see over the last years is the rising concern for privacy. Right? We all knew the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which probably was the most prominent one, but I mean, we have those scandals on a regular basis. And we had in Europe GDPR, and the US also a couple of initiatives trying to tackle that. But especially for the mobile world, you also have now iOS 14, where Apple tries to prevent the IDFA, which is a massive shift in privacy. So this means the IDFA, you can imagine, is kind of like a cookie in the mobile world, right? And Apple wants to prevent the usage of this IDFA. So this means you will not be able to track users down anymore in the mobile world in the old way. Right? So many initiatives trying to find alternatives, but it will not be that easy anymore. And this rising concern for data privacy, I think, will also be a trend for the next couple of years, where just the ownership of a lot of data might not be an asset anymore, but rather a liability. And I'm very excited how the different players will react to that.
I mean, one thing is the data privacy part, but another one is basically the foundation of the internet, the free internet at least, being directly tied to the ability to monetize using user data and attention, right? And what I'm asking myself, like, is there an alignment of what those apps are being built for versus what they should be built for, as in creating value for the user versus creating value for or maximizing the attention that people spend on it. What's your take on that?
So first of all, I think it's kind of a contradiction if we say that the free internet depends on the monetization or on the advertising industry, right? Because if it's free in a liberal sense, then it should not depend on anything. And we know a lot of web pages and apps that only try to increase traffic and not really deliver valuable content anymore, and that's a problem. But I believe, well, what I hope is that the latest trends in cryptography or other engineering innovations that help us, that give us data privacy, but still let those app publishers monetize on the awareness of the user, on advertising if they want, so that we don't have to decide either free internet or data privacy, but bring those two worlds together.
How could such an alternative look like in practice, and what tools are we missing for that?
So one very specific technology here is for example, secure multiparty computing. How this works is, imagine, I don't know, the three of us want to calculate our average salary, right? But we don't want to reveal this here on camera. So what we could do is, I mean, we could tell him and whisper him in his ear and tell him the salaries, right? And he does the math and tells us afterwards. But I just know him for 5 minutes, so I would probably not whisper him my salary. So much better way is actually, during you start, you take a piece of paper and just think of a random number, really big number, right? 1,355,000 whatsoever. And add this to your salary. You write the sum on the piece of paper, give it to me, I open it up. I just now see a random number, which I cannot use, right? Because you add this, let's call it magic number. So I add my salary to it, to a new piece of paper, give it to him, opens it, cannot do anything with it, adds his salary, and gives the new paper to you. You open it up, you subtract your magic number and divide the result by 3, right? And then you can tell us the average salary. So what did just happen is the three of us had very private information that stayed private throughout the process, but we still could do an operation, right? We could still calculate our average salary. And that's a very easy example, but with the same technology, you can also do much more sophisticated things, where, for example, we could share information for a specific service for a specific time, right? In order to, I know that the publisher doesn't advertising on me, which I let them to do, because I tell them, okay, I trust the site app, right? They can show me a Mercedes-Benz advertising, that's fine. But I don't want site to maybe resell this information later on that I like the Mercedes-Benz, right? And so we can have a much more sophisticated approach to advertising, protecting data sovereignty and data privacy in general.
So basically like a data commons, but with a data privacy layer on top of it.
Exactly, yeah.
Where do you see, what is keeping us from getting there? Like, why are we handing off our data to those oligarchies that are obviously keeping us from reaching an equilibrium? This might be strictly better for example, for publishers that have really suffered in the last couple of years. What do you think? What are dynamics that are hindering from it? Is it the technical space that is, or the technical tools that we are missing?
Yeah.
Or are we talking about incentives or maybe even regulation?
I mean, first of all, it's the laziness of the people, right? I mean, GDPR was probably an initiative that had good things in mind, but I mean, as far as I know, it didn't really change much.
Just people clicking on
yes,
OK.
no, everyone just accepts the cookies. So it's just the laziness of the people and the missing awareness. So that's what I said. I mean, I think it's becoming more and more, but it's still on a very low level. Especially if you think that, I just read a study that if you would like to have an ad-free internet, you will need to pay 38 euros per month. And I think I'm paying for my site subscription, I don't know, probably already 20 euros a month. So it's not that much more for getting a full ad-free internet. Yeah. So it's not that big of a jump actually, but people are still very lazy to do so. So that's kind of like on the demand side, but also on the supply side is, I mean, why should companies change there? So far, data ownership is still a valuable asset, right? It's still highly valued on the private equity market, on the public markets, because they can do whatever they want with this data, and as long as they're not being forced to share this data, maybe, or make it public to other players to work with, or to let their users change maybe platforms and take their data with them, there's no incentive for those companies to change. And I'm not sure if really legislation would help. I mean, we saw with GDPR, as said, I think they had good things in mind, but they're usually always, I mean, you know it yourself, years behind what actually is going on.
You've been recently starting an association to advance the privacy but at the same time the public availability of data. That seems like a very big contradiction. I mean, we just heard how it might actually fit in together, though. Can you tell me a little bit more about this? What are your plans around it? Why did you start this association?
Sure. So first of all, it's not a contradiction at all, actually, because also one of the biggest USPs at Adjust always was data privacy. Mm-hmm. I think one of our first clients was Deutsche Telekom, and we went through this data privacy process, 8 years ago, and this was a huge pain, but it also equipped us for all the future fights it came up with, because if you go through the data privacy process of Telecom, you get through every data privacy process on this planet. Probably.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good advertisement for that.
No, so it's not a contradiction at all, right? So that's also what I'm trying to say is I don't want to prevent data usage, right? Mm-hmm. I just want to campaign for data usage with data sovereignty attached to it, more or less. And that's what we're trying with this new foundation. It's called the SINE Foundation. And we consider ourselves as a think and do tank. And think in the sense of that we support academic research in game theory, information design, but also engineering and cryptography to develop those tools that we just talked about, right? Multiparty computing is a very, not a simple one, but one of them, zero knowledge proof, but also economic concepts, right? I started my PhD in game theory a year ago, and I realized they would add so much more value if they're being combined to engineering and cryptography, but they're not being applied yet. So we want to take those beautiful things in the think world and put it into the do world and connect this research to progressive entrepreneurs and realize this research and make it accessible to companies out there that we, as we call it, solve those data sharing dilemmas that we're facing right now.
You kind of blamed the user for not taking up the $38 per month subscription to have an ad-free internet, mm-hmm. But the thing is it doesn't exist, right? So it's kind of hard on the user to engage there when they just have no choice. But what do you think is keeping entrepreneurs from building something like that?
I mean, so first of all, the ad-based internet is a proven business model. So everyone knows it, everyone understands it. Also investors understand them. So it's just a given business model that works, period. And to make something completely new, obviously, is always a bigger challenge. But that's also why we actually founded the SINE Foundation as a non-profit organization, because we realized that it's sometimes very hard to build business models around this idea to actually take out the middleman, right, who tracks the data. And it is hard to monetize it, and it's very hard to just find ideas without advertising or monetizing this data in another way.
Mm-hmm. What do you find from a tech perspective? What's the most interesting developments that you have seen recently?
So the most exciting thing that I read myself, I think it was 1.5 years ago, was about zero knowledge proofs. Mm-hmm. So first, I'm a mathematician by training. So first of all, the idea was beautifully simple but very impressive, just to the realization of it. And so what zero knowledge proof basically means is I prove you something without revealing any information. And so imagine do you know those Where's Waldo books? Those crowded, those pictures with a lot of people on it and stuff, right? And you try to look for one person with a red shirt on it. And imagine we're looking at this book, and I found Waldo, right? And I want to tell you that I found it, and you should believe me. But I don't want to show you where he is, right? Because I don't want to steal the fun of you. So what do? I take a huge piece of paper, which is 4 times the size of the book, and I cut a hole in the middle of the paper. And I put this hole exactly on the position where Waldo is. So you can see Waldo through the hole, but you do not see anything else, right? So I prove to you that I know something where Waldo is without revealing anything else.
Thereby maintaining the data in your own possession.
Exactly. And again, kind of what we have discussed before is your knowledge group is a very powerful instrument. It can be used in very different use cases to, again, combine data usage and data sovereignty at the same time.
Okay, cool. I've got the privilege of being able to just invite people that I would like to talk to, that I know have some insights to share. If you were in my position, who would you interview? Who would you invite?
So first of all, one person that really also started our journey of the SINE Foundation was Elinor Ostrom, the first female winner of the Nobel Prize for Economics. And she had those very impressive studies in the 90s or even earlier, and showed that actually commons can survive, right? And what does it mean is that there was a very influential paper in the 60s by Harding that said that everything that is possessed by many people is getting destroyed very soon, right? Because let's imagine we all own a lake and there are a lot of fish in there, and I want to have some fish, and I'm a little skeptical that you may get a lot of fish, so I'm trying to get more out of it before you get it, right? And we all try to get as many fish as we can.
A tragedy of the commons.
It's a tragedy of the commons at the end. So the lake is dead very, very soon.
Yeah.
And this had huge political impact, right? A lot of privatization happening afterwards. But Elinor Ostrom then showed in the 90s that that's not true. There are a lot of groups that can maintain common goods. And what she did is she analyzed those groups, looked into them, and defined the design principles, how those groups organize themselves. And actually her, I believe, most interesting one, which is not part of the design principles, is her rule that you need to be able to vote by your feet, right? You need to be able to leave the group if you don't like the group anymore. And if this is the case, me in the group, I will try that your rights are being watched, that you have all the rights that you need, that you feel well, because I know you can just leave at any time. And that's also something we don't have in today's internet anymore. Right? You cannot just leave Facebook. I mean, you can, but then you're isolated more or less. You cannot just leave Google, where to go. So to make data interoperability, to kind of transfer data packages from one organization or one digital platform to the other is a very powerful tool as well. And yeah, I think Elinor Ostrom is a very good one to talk to.
Thanks for tuning in to Information and Value. This interview with Aurel was quite intense, and we learned a lot about data privacy and the data commons and how you might be able to combine it. I certainly got a lot from talking to him, and I hope you did too. I would actually like to know your thoughts. Who should we talk to next? What feedback do you have for us? You can write us in the comments below or write me an email. I'd be very happy to hear from you. If you'd like to, I will have some exciting new guests coming up, and I'll see you next week.